So this particular tutorial is for GDQ ICT Honors class on today's date, April the 30th of 2014, and this is to explain to you how to do a breaking report. A breaking report means whenever you have a certain value change, then you print off a footer for that value and a header for the next one. That probably doesn't make any sense to you at all, but think in terms of if you have data like I have right here. And let's go ahead and look at this data that I've created. It's just purely sample data. I've put it in order by the first element in this array. So it's Adam, 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 Marion, Marion, Zachariah, 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 Zachariah. And for each one I have a number here. Let's say it's a amount of money that you're going to give them or something. So you can give them 1,000 lek this day, 1,100 lek this day, 1,010 lek and 1,001 lek, etc. And you want to know, after all the times, how much money have you given to each person here? Or if you like to look at it the other way, this is the amount of money they're going to give you. But you don't want to print Adam every time, and you don't want to print Marion every time. You only want to print a header, and then you want to print the detail line for every detail consisting of just the amount, and then you want to print a total at the bottom of that. So what I've done here, I've started off without anything at all fancy, but just to show you where we're starting, I say for each data as row, echo row 0, that's the name, and then a dash, and then row 1. Now obviously this is not formatted nicely or anything like that. This is just purely for the purpose of helping you to understand. Let's look at the output of that. And you can see over here we've got each name followed by a dash followed by the number. Now let's go ahead and change this so that we only print the name at the top of each one. In order to do that, I've got to remember what my last value was. And I'm going to start off with a value that data will never have, so that I'm sure to print a header on the very first one. So here's what we do. If last equals row 0, that's the name. So in other words, if the, not equal, if it's not equal to, if the last name that we used is different than our current name, then we want to print a new header. So let's do that. Then we want to say echo, and let's put it in a nice, we'll do an H2, and we'll say $row 0, and our H2, put something out there to go on to the next line. And then, this is very important, remember our current value so that the next time around it will be our last value, and we'll be able to compare to that again as we go. So let's see what happens with this. We'll save and we will refresh here. Now notice what we've done. We've got a header at the beginning of each one. Let me put in a debug statement just so that you can see what it is that we're comparing here. Alright, so now we have something here that tells us what the value is for our last and what the value is for our next. Or for our current. So we're always showing at the top of our loop, we're showing what the value is for the last name that we had, not the last name, but the previous name that we had, and what is the value of the current name that we're on in our row. So we'll save this, we'll refresh it, and we'll see what we've got. So we start in, and the first one, it says the last is blank, or it's actually null, which is even more effective than having blank, because theoretically you could have a blank name where somebody just forgot to put the name, but then it wouldn't be null. By actually giving it the value null, that's even more nothing than a blank name. So we're guaranteed that that's never going to be the same. So the last is null on the first one, and the current is Adam. And so in our code over here, we come and we say if last, the null, is not equal to the current, which is Adam. Is that true? Yes, null is not equal to current. Then we come down here and we print this row right here, and you'll see that we've got this. We print the Adam right there, and then we assign last to the current. So now last, instead of having null, now has the value Adam. So, and we go down and we print our detail line here. That's this right here. Then we come back up because we're in the middle of a loop. We come up to the top of the loop again, and we now are on the next piece of data. That's this one right here. And so we print our next debug statement. Last is Adam, row 0 is Adam. So it comes in here and it says, is the last not equal to row 0? Well, Adam is equal to row 0, so this condition is not true. So we don't do anything in here. We don't print a header. And you'll notice there's no header between these two here. We continue on down. We do this again for Adam. We come up with Adam, Adam, Adam for each of these 4 rows here, because we've gone through each of these 4 pieces of data right here. And then, excuse me, Adam, 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 because the first one was up here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we come up to the top of the loop again, but now we're looking at the 5th row, which has a value of Marion. And so now we have Marion. And now when we compare and we say, is last not equal to row 0? Well, as a matter of fact, Adam, the last value, the previous value that we had, is not equal to Marion. And so what do? We come into our section here to print off our header, and then we reassign last to pick up Marion. If we didn't do this, then we would print another header for Marion the next time around. So we've got to make sure to update this last for the next time around in our report here. So now we have Marion with a header. The next Marion, that's this piece of data right here, but there's no change, there's no break in name there, so we don't print a header there. Then the next time we come up with the name Zachariah. We're now on this piece of data right here, and our last value contains Marion because we've just been processing this. This got copied down to here, or actually this got copied to here, and then it stayed here. So the last contains Marion, the current contains Zachariah. Everything's good here. And when we come down here, we say, is the last Marion not equal to the current, that's Zachariah? And we say, oh, actually they're not equal. We've had a break in that value. It's not the same. It's a broken value, a change in that value. And so we print off a new header. So we get the header of Zachariah, and then we come down here. We reassign our Zachariah into last. We print off our detail line here, and then we continue looping all the way to the end, and Zachariah continues to be in the current and in the last all the way to the end, and so we finish off. And you see that we have now put a header in after each one. Now, let's make it just a little bit more complicated here, because not only do we want a header, but we want a footer. We want a total of all those values. Now, let's get rid of our debug statement here, and let's change our value here so that it's a little bit nicer, and you can see what we've got. Now we've got Adam 1000, 1100, 1010, 1001, and we want to sum up all of those values. So here's what we're going to do. Again, we're only going to do it on the break. We're not going to do it in the middle of the Adams or in the middle of the Marions or in the middle of the Zachariah. It's only when we change from one to the next. When we change from Adam to Marion, that's when we want to print a total of all of these values. However, we want to do it before we print the header of Marion because it's a total that has to do with Adam, right? So here's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to, in our code down here, with each value, we're going to have to say total plus equals $row1. So that's saying we're going to sum up the value each time on each detail. We've got to start with a total of 0. And every time we change last, before we print the new value there, we're going to have to print the total of the last one. So we're going to say echo total, and then we are going to reset the value of total to 0. If I don't, then it's just going to keep on going, and it's going to total all of the Adams, and then I print off the total of the Adams and continue on to the Marions, but then the total at the bottom of Marion will include all of the values in Adam. So that's why I have to change this total back down to 0. So don't forget that. Every time you change a value that you're breaking on, you have to be sure to reset that. and every time you print off your totals or your footers, you have to make sure that you reset that for the next time. Let's go ahead and see what happens with this. It is not complete. We're going to find that we've left some very important parts out, but let's see what happens here. Right now, we have a total of 0 at the top. What? That doesn't make any sense. Well, let's see if other things are working okay. We print all these down here, and then we print a total of 4111. That looks pretty good. Then 12220. That looks pretty good. And then we come down here and whoops, we don't have any total at all. Let's go ahead and address this issue here first. Total : 0. Why is that printing at the top? Because last null, we come in here, even though we don't have any value from before, we still break here in order to print our header. But on the very first one, we don't want to print our footer because we don't have any previous name before Adam that we're printing a total for. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to say if $last not equal null, then do this. And notice that I'm being very careful to keep all of my indentation exact. I added a new level of indentation here, so I indented both of these lines. And now what I'm saying is if last is not null, then go ahead and print the total. But if last is null, which is the case on the first one, then don't print it off. So let's see if that will work. I come here and I save it, and sure enough, we got rid of this total up at the top. But we've still got a problem that down at the very end, we don't have our total. What's the deal with that? Well, think about it. We are printing a total every time you change from a name to another name. So we're looping through this entire piece of data up here, all of these rows, and when we come to the end of Adam and the beginning of Marion, our value has broken, so we print a total. Then we come to the end of Marion and it changes to Zachariah. It breaks, and so we print a total for the Marions. Then we come to the ends of the Zacharias and it doesn't change anything. Why doesn't it change anything? Because at the end of this, it just skips right out of this whole loop here. See, we've got this loop that's going through for each on all of these, and it doesn't actually do it. So if I were to, for instance, put in a new value here, then you would see that it would print a total for Zachariah. However, we don't want to do that because we don't want this foo down here. That's not part of our data, but that just shows you what happens if we had something else in there. What we've got to do is at the end of our loop, we've got to clean up our final records and our final totals, print any last footers that we have. So now we're going to say echo total and I messed something up here. That should do it. Now when we do it, now we have this. Now I'm going to demonstrate to you where this becomes a problem. I don't really like this format that we've got here, with these being left justified and then these being out away from this. Yeah, it stands out, but it doesn't really work for me. So I would like to change it so that it does something like this. When it does the total, I would rather it do this. Won't that look nicer? That way we can have this and then a line and the total. Great, great. Oh dear. We didn't make the change to our second footer there. And this is where you run into something where whenever you're going to do the same thing 2 or 3 or 1,000 times, you want to move it into a function. If you don't, then you have to remember to change every single occurrence of it. If you fix a bug in one of them, you've got to fix a bug in the other. This is where redundant code or repeated code is a real problem. See, right now we've got this line here, echo our total, and this line here, echo our total, the same. So watch how I can do this. I'm going to take this line up here, that's the way I like it, and I'm going to copy it down below, and we're going to call it print total. And I'll put that in there. And we've got to make sure that we get the, well, we'll just pass in the total. That's a nicer way to do it. We're going to pass in the total. And now when I'm down here and I say print total, now it's going to call the same code. So I come over here, I update it, and lo and behold, it's doing the same thing here in the middle of the report as it does here at the bottom of the report. But you know what? I don't really like it because all of these numbers only have 4 digits, and I've put in, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, I've put in 6 equal sign. That doesn't look very nice. So we'll get rid of 2 of the equal signs here. And now notice, because I have taken my redundant code and put it inside a single function, now it fixed this here, and this looks nice, and at the same time it fixed this down at the bottom. So, in review, in order to make a breaking report, we have to have our data in order. If our data is not in order, then we end up with way too many breaks, and it breaks every time. Like if I had this Adam and Marion and Zachariah all mixed in here, then every time it changed from Adam to Marion to Zachariah, back to Adam, back to Zachariah, back to Marion, it would be changing and printing my headers all the time. So you've got to have your data in order. You're going to do that with your SQL statement, right? You're going to have an order by that makes sure that you get them in the order you want, and you're going to be making sure that whatever you're comparing here, I've chosen to just use a first name because that makes life easy for me, but you want something that you're guaranteed to have a unique value. So if you were, for instance, to check both first name and last name, that would feel pretty comfortable, right? No, because remember that John Smith that I put in the data. And John Smith has 2 people that have the same first and the same last name. So whatever you're going to compare, you've got to make sure, absolutely sure, that you are comparing a unique value. Think about that for a second, and you should be able to come up with something that is guaranteed to be unique that you're going to compare. So you've got your data, and you know that all of those unique values are grouped together, and then you're going to come down here, you're going to assign a previous value or a last value, and you're going to assign it something that that value could never be. Null is a pretty good safe thing, or sometimes you might want to use like a negative number or some kind of, people are tempted to use just very random numbers like AAA, BBB, XXX or something like that. I would say you're better off choosing something that even in the wildest imaginations could never happen, like a null could never happen, or a negative number, because primary keys are guaranteed to be never negative numbers if they're on auto increment. So that gives, oh, I just gave that away, didn't I? I hope you were listening. So the last value needs to be set to something that none of your data will ever have. You need to set any kind of totals that you're going to do, or make sure that you've got initialized value. Then you loop through your data, and at the top of your data, you check to see if there's been any kind of a break or a change in that key value that you are comparing against. And whenever that changes, you want to print a footer, and then you want to print a header. You always print the footer first because you've got to finish off the previous values before you can print off the header for the next value. Now I'm doing a footer of a total and a header of a new name up there. You're going to be doing a little bit more than that. You're going to be closing off a table in your footer, and then in your header you're going to be printing the header of a new class, and then you're going to be starting off a new table. And that's more than I really should have told you, but I'm really trying to help you out here to figure out where we're going. And then you come on down here and you print off your actual detail line of the line that comes from your data. Then at the very end, you need to make sure to clean up by finishing off and printing your final closing footer in there. I hope that helps you in understanding a breaking report. A breaking report is something you do all the time in computers. Whenever you're working with data, you are going to be doing breaking reports. So get used to this idea where you save aside the previous value, and sometimes you may have to save more than one value in order to make sure it's unique. But then you're comparing, printing the footer, printing the header, and then going on and printing the detail.